You know what? This isn't stained by someone in Minneapolis. It's still got a shine on it. And so did theirs.
He is fleeking!
Death, Reagan, and police unions, the three inescapable evils of life. Welcome back to I Think You Should Know This, and today we're breaking down police unions. I'm not sure how many people know just how destructive and traitorous police unions are. Today I'll go over how police unions operate, how they are different from other labor movements, and just how effective they are at preventing any shred of police accountability. If you enjoy learning about current events, especially those related to policing, please go ahead and subscribe to not miss my next video. Before I get started, I just want it to be known how much research it took to make this video, and boy oh boy, I never want to know this much about police unions ever again. Onward. Quick history lesson time. Police unions were invented kind of at the beginning of the 20th century with the Boston police strike of 1919. They were the first to really strike as a collective force for better pay and better working conditions. Technically, the first police union was created with the then Patrolman Benevolent Association of the City of New York. It's now the Police Benevolent Association of New York, to be inclusive of women who become cops. But the PBA was initially created as just a fraternal group for cops to socialize. It would only later become a labor union. Early organizing efforts for them to gain union representation was actually pretty unsuccessful. They only really started to get momentum in the 60s and 70s with the civil rights era and desegregation. And because so much of the momentum of police unionization in the 60s and 70s is so tied to desegregation and this idea of higher crime because there were going to be more people of color in predominantly white areas, police unionization is really intrinsically tied to this idea of white ethno-nationalism. There's a ton of really good reading that I'm happy to put on the screen here that really goes into the history of how much police unions are really tied to white supremacy. In 2025, the Fraternal Order of Police is the largest police organization in the US with over 375,000 members. Although they themselves are not solely a union, they house local unions within their organization. The largest individual police union is that Police Benevolent Association of the City of New York, which represents over 25,000 members of the NYPD. I will say, just from my time living there, I definitely do know more about the PBA or the NYPD more than other police unions or police forces. So I feel like a lot of my information here does have a bit of a New York spin to it. The vast majority of police union presidents are white men. The Marshall Project found that out of the 15 biggest police departments that have a majority of a police force that is people of color, 14 out of 15 of them have union presidents that are white men. Somewhere between 60 to 80% of law enforcement in the United States do belong to a union. I really struggled to find an exact number though. But when a local union is available to a police department, it's not uncommon for 100% of that department to belong to that union. And police departments often stress the importance of officers belonging to a union. A quick Google search elicits responses like, quote, why every police officer should join a police union, and quote, police unions, 5 reasons why every police officer should join one. One of the key components mentioned in these articles is the rights that police unions have been able to secure for police officers, especially when it comes to disciplinary processes or misconduct records. A research paper from the University of Victoria found that after police unions were formed in the 50s and 60s, there was a substantial increase in the amount of police violence against civilians. Within a decade of gaining collective bargaining rights, officers were killing an additional 60 to 70 civilians per year. A 2018 University of Oxford study, I'm going to look at my notes for this one, of the 100 largest American cities found that protections in police contracts secured by police unions were directly and positively correlated with violence against civilians. In 2019, a University of Chicago study found that extending collective bargaining rights to Florida sheriff deputies in 2003 led to a 40% statewide increase in cases of police violence. These trends are believed to be a result of police officers feeling sheltered from prosecution of misconduct because of the rights they secured in their union agreements. Before I get into the absolute unfathomable power that police unions have secured for themselves, I want to talk about how differently they've positioned themselves away from other labor movements. Police unions have zero worker solidarity with other unionization efforts. That's why so many people consider police unions to be more so like a cult-like fortress solely focused on upholding police interests, not necessarily a pillar of upholding like labor or worker rights in general. The police have regularly met union protesters with violence throughout history. As early as the Haymarket Affair of 1886, which is still celebrated as International Workers' Day, to just this last February when the LAPD was seen arresting mental health workers who were protesting for better wages and working conditions outside of Kaiser Los Angeles Medical Center. While union organizing is seen as precious by police officers for their own rights, they have no real worker solidarity with any other labor movements trying to gain access to the same rights. In a similar sense, police unions defy a lot of stereotypical partisan beliefs on labor unions. While the right has historically been seen as anti-labor union, conservatives are incredibly pro-cop, a loyalty that really extends to their unions and whatever protections they might need to uphold law and order. On the flip side, the left has historically been more pro-union, but they might be a little bit more willing to criticize policing or some of the unanimous police protections that unions have been able to secure. Now, that being said, police union lobbying groups have spent a shit ton of money on both sides of the political aisle. Over the last decade alone, police unions and associations have spent almost $50 million on state lobbying and almost $71 million on state-level candidates. The top 3 states that have received the most police union lobbying money are California, New York, and Texas. And it's definitely not just Republicans that they're spending this money on. Gavin Newsom, Democrat governor of California, has received millions of dollars from police union lobbying groups in California. And the top recipient of police union money in the U.S. House is a Democrat from New Jersey. This success lobbying both sides of the political spectrum means that police unions have secured an enormous amount of power in their union contracts. Efforts to solidify qualified immunity protections for police officers, which I think I went over in my first video here on YouTube, first came out of police union lobbying. But there are so many more, arguably just as problematic protections that police unions have been able to secure in their bargaining agreements. A majority of police union contracts require purge clauses, where departments must erase disciplinary records after an agreed-upon amount of time, even when officers have been accused of sexual misconduct. In 18 cities, suspensions are erased in 3 years or less, making it incredibly difficult to track when police officers have been suspended in the past for misconduct. Oh, and I didn't know this part, but 20 cities allow for officers being disciplined for misconduct to forfeit sick leave or vacation time instead of serving their suspension. That's wild. Many contracts allow officers to see the entirety of the file on their alleged misconduct, including witness statements and photos and videos and other evidence, before they're interrogated. Other contracts set time limits for civilians to file complaints against officers, some as little as 30 days. Oh, and some cities prevent anonymous complaints from ever being investigated. And remember, in almost every single way, none of these legal protections are afforded to us as civilians when we're being investigated. They are only afforded to police officers when they are. If there's one thing that police union presidents hate, it's any semblance of police accountability. Bob Kroll, famous white supremacist and president of the police union in Minneapolis, described the protests for police accountability after the killing of George Floyd as a, quote, terrorist movement. When 4 officers were fired for killing Floyd, Kroll vowed to fight their dismissal tooth and nail until they were reinstated. John Catanzara, head of Chicago's Fraternal Order of Police, berated 2 police officers who knelt in solidarity with Black Lives Matter protesters, calling their actions, quote, ridiculous, and threatening to expel them from the union. And Patrick Hendry, president of the PBA in New York City, described the Civilian Complaint Review Board, an external agency tasked with investigating complaints of police misconduct, as a, quote, rogue agency staffed with anti-police activists on a mission to eradicate any form of effective policing. When the idea for a civilian complaint review board was first proposed in 1992 for New Yorkers, the PBA rioted against then-Mayor David Dinkins outside City Hall. 10,000 mostly off-duty cops protested, breaking down barricades and surrounding City Hall, all while hurling various racial slurs towards Dinkins, who at the time was the first and only black mayor, and other black people nearby. The NYPD and their union, the PBA, still hate the presence of the Civilian Complaint Review Board and still take any opportunity to try to limit their power. In 2018, when the Civilian Complaint Review Board announced it would start to investigate cases of sexual misconduct by the NYPD, its union came out in full force, trying to prevent anyone from being able to investigate these cases but themselves. When the CCRB announced its decision to start investigating sexual misconduct by the NYPD, then PBA president, famously Pat Lynch, called it a, quote, bold-faced power grab to create a CCRB regime that is more abusive to police officers than ever before. Police unions are also incredibly effective at helping cops evade accountability or be reinstated if they have faced any disciplinary action. In 2020, 2 Buffalo police officers shoved a 75-year-old unarmed man to the ground, where he cracked his head open and started to bleed on the sidewalk. An arbitrator hired by their police union later sided with the police officers, finding that the man's fall, quote, might well have had as much to do with the fact that he was holding objects in each hand or his advanced age as the fact that he was shoved to the ground. If you need a refresher on what that footage looks like, here you go.
He is fleeing!
Out of his ears! Please out of his ears! Get somebody over here! He's bleeding out of his ear!
I think he fell to the ground because he was shoved to the ground. I feel like I'm going insane. Between 2015 and 2021, the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department reinstated 37 terminated officers, 17 of whom had been deemed a, quote, threat to safety. This was after arbitrators overruled the department, costing district taxpayers $14.3 million. Washington, D.C.'s audit found that 36 of the 49 officers fired between 2015 and 2021 were reinstated, and each one of them received, on average, $374,000 from the district. One officer, who was terminated in 2009 after being found guilty of sexually assaulting a young woman in the back of his patrol car, was reinstated 10 years later and given over $500,000 in back pay. And this was all work of the police union. I'm going to go ahead and finish this video up here. Please let me know if you have any questions about any of the content I covered in this video or any of the other issues I've covered thus far on my channel. And let me know if you have any suggestions on issues you'd like me to cover in the future. I have a few things that I'm working on, but I'm always open to ideas. Bye!